Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 567. I had the white pieces and kicked off with d4. My opponent played f5, the Dutch defense. So this is an interesting defense. I often reply with the move e4, the Staunton gambit, but as you can see here, this is not doesn't give any big advantage to white. It's good for sort of confusing your opponent a little bit, getting him out of his opening book, but in a serious game I usually go for this main line with g3. So the idea with g3 is to stop this f-pawn from coming forward too quickly. A lot of times black plays the Dutch defense with this aggressive intent of kingside castling and pushing this pawn forward to disrupt white's pawn structure. So putting the brakes on it in advance is not a bad idea. Knight f6, the main response, and bishop g2 going into the fianchetto. And now there's two main ways for black to respond here with either g6, the Leningrad Dutch, or e6. And nowadays it seems like g6 is the more popular move, particularly at the top level. We see players like Nakamura playing that. So perfectly reasonable way to play, but e6 also a fine system and can go for the stonewall, which is what happens in this game, or also just other setups. You can just go with a queenside fianchetto, for example. Let's see. So I play knight f3. I could continue with c4 immediately, but I want to hold this pawn back and wait and see how black deploys first. So I delay that c4 move for quite a few moves. But you see, it still keeps an edge to white. So I'm not playing badly here. And now black is going for the stonewall setup with d5, but he prepares it with c6, which is really a little bit unnecessary. He can play d5 immediately if he wants to play that. The other way to play this is just to quickly develop the king side and leave these pieces on the queen side unassigned for a moment. Just finish the king side development first. But anyway, he goes with c6. And after bishop g5, we're out of the opening book. I guess if I were to have played c4 here, we'd still be in a main line. But like I said, I was holding that in reserve. But anyway, bishop g5 is not a bad move in this position. Since he's got this light squared pawn structure, I'm thinking of going for a dark squared pawn structure and just trading off this dark squared bishop, which will leave me with no problem pieces. So that's sort of what happens in the game. He actually makes it a little bit easier for me by the way he plays. He plays bishop e7. I go with e3 now, so I've completely clamped down on this push here. And also I've got this bishop outside the pawn chain, so this e3 move doesn't lock this bishop away. And he goes d5 now, so he's set up the stonewall. I castle. He castles. And then I bring my knight out. I could have played c4 there as well, probably. He goes knight bd7 and rook to c1. So I'm just getting everything set up for that c4 push. But I've been kind of slow about it, and I think black can now equalize. It looks like pushing the b pawn forward is kind of interesting. Even b5, which actually stopped me from playing c4. So that's one of the motivations for playing c4 a little bit earlier. I was taking a very relaxed approach to that. Anyway, but he helps me out here by playing knight to e4. So opens up this line between the two bishops, and I'm happy to exchange off my dark squared bishop, which doesn't have a lot of squares, and I win his dark squared bishop, which actually is the better piece in his pawn structure. And now I go with c4. So this has been a successful opening from my point of view. He didn't take advantage of my slowness to play c4, and he also traded off the dark squared bishop that I put outside the pawn chain. So overall, this has been good for white. Let's see, but he's still in the game. I guess that's the point I wanted to mention. The next move he makes is a mistake, and it kind of gives the advantage to me that's significant. Opening this position up is really a mistake for black. The black player has this kind of closed position, and he should keep it closed until his pieces are a little more set. This bishop in particular needs to find something to do. So one idea would be to move this knight to f6 and maneuver the bishop around like this and bring it out on this diagonal. And that's a very common idea in the stonewall. It's like this bishop theoretically is a bad piece because it's behind these pawns at the moment, but it can find some useful role in the position and be effective. So it's not like white is winning at this point. White is comfortable But black just needs to go slowly and get his pieces into the game at a slower pace, and he'll be fine. But this move of opening things up right away, e5, it's just a mistake. Even if it didn't lose a pawn, it would still be a mistake. But it loses a pawn here too, so he's sacrificing a pawn for not much. I grab the pawn. It's interesting, the computer here thinks it's even stronger to not bother with that, but bring the queen out to b3, attack the d pawn, which is pinned, and also put some pressure on the b pawn. So that's an interesting way to play as well. But grabbing the pawn isn't bad either. He goes knight b6, and I go b3. I wanted to keep his knight from coming into the c4 square. Bishop to e6, so he finally got his bishop off the back rank, but it's still not doing a whole lot. It's got a defensive job here, holding up his center and blockading my pawn. So I go knight d4. I'm just going to maneuver my knights around to better squares. Goes rook a c8, and I go with the other knight to f3. So I've managed to move them forward a bit, step by step. So he comes in here with knight to c3, kind of an interesting idea. Hitting my queen, hitting the pawn. But I think the knight's a bit, doesn't have a lot of things to do over on this side of the board, so it's kind of going in the wrong direction here. What's the engine want to play? Knight to d7. Yeah, that would bring this knight back into the game, put some pressure on my center pawn here, which is isolated. Okay, but anyway, he went knight to c3. So I could go queen to d2 and hold on to the pawn, but I thought the queen might be a little more active over here, and I thought I was winning the pawn back. Actually, it's a little bit of a miscalculation. He grabbed here, and I chased the knight away with rook to a1. He goes back to b4. But he goes back to b4 with the tempo, so I don't have time to grab the pawn. So I go here, queen to b5, putting a little pressure on his knights. And and right here he makes a big mistake. So he plays rook c5. And can you spot, this is your tactical quiz for this video, can you spot the problem with that move, rook to c5? Okay, pause the video if you want time to think about it. I'm going to give the answer away now. He did play rook to c5, and it just leaves his knight hanging. It's interfered with the queen's defense of this knight on b4, so I can just take that knight. There's there's no tricks. You know, it looks like my queen is in a line with his queen, so there might be some discovered attack, but as long as this rook isn't moving with check, as long as my king is not in check here, then my queen is perfectly safe on that b4 square. So I can after he attacks my queen with rook to c5, I can just take that knight. And instead, you know, I was kind of moving a little too quickly and not thinking about it. In this position, and both those knights are protected, so if my queen were attacked here, I would have to retreat. And I guess I had that in mind, so when he attacked my queen, I retreated. But of course, the attack itself created a new square for my queen to go to, which would have been much better. Anyway, typical kind of blunder from me. Okay, queen e2. He goes rook f to c8. And now I go queen d2, hitting his knight again. He goes with the knight to c2, drops his knight all the way in here, but probably still a mistake. Well, I'm keeping an edge. No, that made it worse. Yeah, the knight, I don't know how the knight is ever going to get out of that square. Although, the engine thinks I should grab the pawn at this point, but I thought maybe I could pen this knight, force some trades, and have a good position after that. So now he needs to play knight takes d4. This is kind of his last chance to stay in the game. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, what might have happened here. If he took knight takes d4, I would take back. I'm still keeping pressure on his bishop here. He can trade out, but I think that doesn't accomplish anything. Or he can play bishop to f7. Okay, getting the bishop away from the knight. Okay, so there's no immediate breakthrough. He can also take on c1. Yeah, okay, after the engine thinks for a while, it likes that a little bit better. And then king to f7, defending that way. Interesting way to play, but white still has a comfortable edge here. Okay, so let's go back to the game. He played knight d7, and that just leaves this knight hanging. So the second time he left his knight hanging, I decided to take it. Well, I noticed it this time. And after a couple of trades, let's see, he brings his queen out to c5, but I can just move my knight back to d4 where it came from. So he resigned. He's just a piece down here, and not a particularly good position. His bishop is hanging, so he's got to do something about that immediately. And so he resigned, and that's how the game ended. I thought it was pretty interesting, particularly the opening phases. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.